In a world of podcasts, five guys dare to discuss the peculiar, the terrifying, the unknown, and probably a lot of sports and beer. Stay tuned. It's about to get crazy. The Drink Beer and Bullshit Podcast.
All right, and welcome. This is the Drink Beer and Bullshit Podcast, YouTube edition. My name is Rigo. I will be one of your 5 hosts that will be filling your mind with wonders and all kinds of colorful information. We might not make you any smarter, but damn it, I'll get you ready for a game show or two. Now, first things first. We can't have a drinking show without drinking. And yes, Swish, I am calling you out. You did a video and never once had a drink. So I will be starting with some whiskey. Some good stuff here. Some Widow Jane 10-year. That's just a little bit to get my whistle wet. Very good stuff. Now, of course, you can't have whiskey without a good cigar, right? By all means, we're cultured people. Now, I am married, and I am married to a Mexican woman, so I am not allowed to smoke indoors. So, moving on. Give you guys a little bit of rundown on what we're going to be doing. Our format's going to be 5 guys drinking, bullshitting, having a conversation, talking about all kinds of topics, from the mundane to the extreme. Well, probably not mundane because that'd be a little boring, but anyways, you get the gist of it. We'll be talking about aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, paranormal, urban legends, movies, music, sports. We'll debate it all. We'll have fun with it all. And we'll be putting down a lot of alcohol, that's for sure. Now, this is going to be just a short video to hype up our channel, which will be launching April 1st on Fool's Day. So don't forget to tune in then. Also, log into our YouTube channel. Hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any content. Now let's get started here. A little bit about myself. I am from the Lone Star State. That is the great state of Texas. For all you northerners that don't know what the Lone Star State is. I am originally from Washington, so no, I am not a Cowboys fan. I am a Seahawks fan. I am from Washington State. I have to throw state out there because, like Swish said, a lot of people confuse it with Washington, D.C. So, I am officially now from Texas, still a Seahawk fan. I have a background in criminal justice, and I am skeptical. I want to believe, but seeing is believing to me, and I'm extremely skeptical about the paranormal, ghosts, so forth. But if it is true, I'm not sure if I want to see that. So I am skeptical. I believe in the biological. Damn it, Bigfoot has a chance of being real. So, on that note, Swish gave you a little bit of flavor on his first video about some of the stuff that we'll be covering. He covered some paranormal, some ghost experiences that he had when he was younger. That is something that we'll be covering. Like I said, we'll be covering a plethora of things. But after this past weekend, I'm going to have to change it up a little bit and go talk about a little bit of the sweet science, some boxing. I grew up watching boxing with my parents, with my family, my whole family actually, and just a big fan of the sweet science. You know, there's nothing you can appreciate more. It's just two guys going at it and fighting the Mexican style. Me being Mexican, of course, I appreciate that style. But before we move on with that, I'd like to, we lost a great one this past weekend. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Hall of Famer, passed away at the young age of 66 years old. Had great fights, gave us fights against Hearns, Duran, Leonard. This was a guy that he fought everybody, didn't duck nobody, and every time that he came to fight, you knew what you were going to get. It was going to be a war. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to dance. He was going to let you have it. He was going to go on your shield, as they say. Especially nowadays with all these prima donnas, these Insta famous, TikTok famous boxers that are more worried about what the social media people, influencers, or whatever you want to call them, think about themselves. These guys were fighters. There's nothing better than especially the middleweights back in the late 70s, mid 80s. And he was one of the great ones. 62 wins, 52 of them by knockout. I mean, one of the highest knockout percentages of all time. He was just a great fighter, and you will be missed, champ. You rest in peace. Now, since we are talking about middleweights, yes, Art, Hector, Meddy, Johnny, got to bring up the best middleweight of the modern era, and knowing that little cinnamon. Talking about Gennady Ganelovich Golovkin, Triple G, the Kaz assassin. Now, that is one of the most avoided fighters of all time. He had an outstanding amateur record, over 300 fights, over 300 wins. Silver medalist, turned pro, and just started knocking everybody out. And he's not a big middleweight. He looks more like a natural middleweight. He probably could have shrunk down to light middleweight or junior middleweight and fought there and just destroyed everybody. But he was destroying everybody in middleweight. And again, no one wanted to fight him. And I know not everybody, but some people really think Canelo is a better fighter, and I'll give you that. Canelo is a good fighter. But one of the things that I hate is the politics of boxing, and that's kind of, I think, what dirties the water a little bit. And I don't know, I used to think it was Oscar De La Hoya's promotional company that was really hurting Canelo's image. It seemed like he was sugar picking everybody, because when no one wanted to fight Golovkin, he fought everybody. Everybody who lined up, everybody who would take a shot at him, he would fight him. Now, I'll give you an example. Canelo beat Cotto, and he beat him at a catch weight. Cotto had the WBC middleweight belt. Canelo still didn't come up completely to 160. It was a catch weight for that belt. And for those of you who don't know what a catch weight is, I think they might have fought at 155. I'm not 100% sure. But he beat him. And he did beat him. I saw that fight and I thought it was close, but he beat him. So the mandatory at that time for the WBC was Golovkin. Now, for whatever reason, the WBC is always bending over backwards for Canelo. So they said, okay, you know what? You don't have to fight him right away. You can fight it. You can have a few other fights, But he won it in 2015, and like by mid 2016, you're gonna have to fight Golovkin. So that was it. Started going into negotiations, and then what did Canelo do? Instead of fighting him, he vacated that belt. And if that's not ducking, I don't know what it is, because that is the definition of ducking. You give up your championship belt not to fight this guy? I can't think of another reason why he would. He wasn't injured. He continued to fight. He just would not fight Golovkin. Now, like I said, Golovkin is a monster. He has 41 wins with 36 KOs. So that is the all-time best knockout percentage, just under 90%. Okay, and so he kept fighting since Canelo wouldn't fight him. Canelo kept on building his reputation, started becoming the face of boxing. And Golovkin could just fight with who he could fight. You know, and a lot of people say that, Kell Brook exposed him. You know, Kell Brooks was a great fighter. He was one of the pound-for-pound greats at that time. He was 36-0 when he came up in weight to fight Golovkin. And everybody says, Kell Brook gave you the blueprint on how to beat him. You know, he pushed him to his limits. Now, maybe for a couple of rounds, I remind everybody, they stopped that fight after 5 rounds because Golovkin literally broke Kell Brook's face. Broke it. And he was never the same fighter after that. So, I don't know what you want to call that, the blueprint, but maybe the blueprint to get your face broken into, but anyways. Back to the story. After that happened, Golovkin fights this next mandatory, which is Daniel Jacobs. Now, Daniel Jacobs puts up a good fight, and a lot of people said that fight was close, and that Daniel Jacobs did a great job against him, but Daniel Jacobs got knocked down, and the only thing that was different is that fight went the distance. The first time anybody had taken Golovkin the distance. He still won that fight. I think it was 8 rounds to 4. Is that close? I don't know. I guess it's closer than the other fights had been. So now Golovkin is starting to show a little bit of his age. Now Canelo wants to fight him. Right? So before you get me going on Canelo Triple G1, that was not a draw. I'm sorry. I think I've had like one person try to argue with me that was a draw. That was a Golovkin win. And not even, I mean, it wasn't a shutout. It wasn't like 120 to 108, but man, that was at the very least, it was 116. I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess at the very most it was 116, 112, but 117, 118 Golovkin, that was all Canelo did was run that whole fight. You know, he did catch Golovkin with a few punches, but he walked right through him. Now, I'll give you this. I'll give Canelo this. He does have a good chin. Golovkin caught him a few times, and he was able to stay up. Most people don't, or most other fighters don't, I should say. But a draw, come on. And the other thing that pissed me off before that whole fight even kicked off, Canelo is so arrogant. Golovkin has, like 4 belts, I think, at that time, right? The only one he didn't have was the WBO. And they did like a 70-30 split. That's what Golovkin settled for. Canelo getting 70. He was the challenger, not the champion. Because that was the only way he could get him to fight him. And then Canelo would not concede on the ring walk. He made the champion come out first, and the challenger came out second, which was him in the ring walk, being the last guy out of the locker room. Come on. A champion walks out last. I don't care who the challenger is. That was little things like that. You know, Golovkin was always humble, always, gave respect. And don't get me wrong, I used to like Canelo, but it was like I said, I don't know if it was him or Oscar. I know there's some business to boxing, but It just kind of left a little bit of sour taste in my mouth. And then a draw? Come on. All right, so then draw happens. What's next? The automatic rematch, right? Coming up. Oh, tainted meat, right? Canelo tests positive for steroids. That big old shredded physique he had, cost him that fight. So they had to reschedule it. Golovkin moves on, fights some nobody, and because of Canelo having to push back and Golovkin not wanting to lose another fighting opportunity, he fought somebody else. Now, the IBF had a mandatory, which was Derevyanchenko, right? So Golovkin was supposed to fight Derevyanchenko, but he was also at that time in negotiations to fight with Canelo. So Canelo's his big rival. That's who he wants. He wants the big fights, the fights that are going to cement his legacy. So he gave up his IBF belt, not fighting Derevyanchenko. So that's why he lost that IBF, right? So that fight with Canelo was finally made, and that was a great fight. So it goes from a draw, if you want to call it that, to a very close fight, razor thin. And I am a Golovkin fan. I think Canelo won that fight. I do. He completely changed his mentality. He stopped trying to fight off the back foot, which Canelo never did before, but I think he wasn't sure about the power that Golovkin had, and that didn't work in the first fight. I think with him changing his style, if he would have thought he won that first fight like he says he did, he would have stayed with that style. But he knew he lost that first fight and he had to change it. And he came after him. Now that fight was close. I had Canelo winning 115 to 113. If they would have said a draw, I would have been okay with that, because certain rounds were so tight. If they would have said Golovkin won by that same score, I would have been okay with that too. It was razor thin. So draw, razor thin decision for Canelo. And now Canelo doesn't want to fight him again. I mean, he knew he was in a war. I mean, that's what fans want to see. They want to see those close fights. They want to see the rubber match, the trilogy, when the fights are that close. One of our hosts here, Art, I'm calling you out. He says he'd rather see Canelo fight other people. Who's Canelo fighting? Canelo hasn't fought no one since then. You know what? I'll give him Callum Smith, because I thought Callum Smith was the best middleweight the best super middleweight in that division. And he beat him. He destroyed him. I'll give him that. But the super middleweights is weak. And Canelo cherry picks. Whatever you want to think. I'll give you another example. The middleweights division at 160, it is stacked with talent. You got Golovkin there, who gave him his greatest fights, or his toughest fights. I know he hasn't lost to Mayweather, but that wasn't a tough fight. Mayweather's Canelo was not ready. He was too young at the time, and Mayweather schooled him, ran from him the whole time, and just pointed him up, won by points. So, like I say, Mayweather's one of the greatest boxers of our time that never had a great fight. That's just not his style, right? His style is just to run and hit you, and you can't hit him. I know that's part of boxing, but that's boring fighting. So anyways, the middleweights are stacked with talent. You have Golovkin, you have Charlo, who's a beast there, Derevyanchenko, who's proven now. You got Boo Boo Andrade in there, who's probably not one of the best matchups that you'd want to have, but he is a champion. He's been a champion for a little while. You got youngsters coming up. You got Munguia there, who I don't know. I think all of those guys knock him out, though. He needs to work on his defense a little bit. In 168, who do you got? Benavidez is the only guy that is a huge power puncher. But let me set this up a little bit better. why I think Canelo cherry picks. So before, he said he wanted legacy fights, right? He wanted fights to cement his legacy, to cement his career. He didn't care about straps. That's why he gave up the WBC. That's why after winning the WBO from Golovkin, I'm sorry, not the WBA from Golovkin, he got stripped from it because I forgot who he didn't fight. Now, I think that was more Oscar than on him, but that was his excuse. He didn't need the belts. To him, the belts were nothing. To him, he wanted the legacy fights, the tough fights, the fights that fans want to see. Hey, buddy, we want to see the Golovkin fight, right? Before he gets too old, before Mayweather-Pacquiao when it happened like 5 years too late. And, Golovkin's getting up there in age. And in boxing, you age quick, man. So, he wants legacy fights, right? Never cared about the belts. Now, all of a sudden, he has a division that's weak. It's weak from top to bottom. And now you ask him, oh, I want to unify. I want to get all the belts. That's what's important to him. Then they ask him about Benavidez, who's probably the toughest challenger left in the super middleweight division. What's his response? Well, he don't have a belt. I want the belts. He doesn't have a belt. I'm not going to fight him. And what surprised me is it was an interview, and he corrected himself. He kind of talked his way back out of it. But they asked him, well, how about if Benavidez fights Plant, and then you fight him after Billy Joe Saunders? He's like, well, I don't know. That's something that we would have to figure it out. I was like, what do you mean something you have to figure out? You just said you want all the belts. Now all of a sudden you have an actual challenge and some guy who's going to pose a challenge to you, and you got to see. His same response was if Golovkin moved up and got one of the belts. I don't know. We'll see. Now, Golovkin looked good the last fight that he had. So I'm hoping there's some rumors that which I think he will, Canelo will get past Billy Joe Saunders, and I hope he knocks out Billy Joe Saunders. That's a guy that I can't stand even less than Canelo. So, and then he fights Plant in September, that he would fight Golovkin in December. But I got a feeling he's going to make Golovkin come up to 168. And like I said, Golovkin's not a very big guy. He's a natural middleweight that he might slow down some at 168. And I think Canelo will fight him at that. I don't think he'll come down to 160. Maybe a catch weight, but that wouldn't benefit Golovkin. But Canelo holds all the cards here, unfortunately. So if that happens, great. But I think Golovkin turns 39 or 40 this year. Shit, I'm not sure. It might be a little too late on that. So I'll give him credit when he stops making excuses and he fights the people that are out there, right? He went up to light heavyweight to fight Kovalov, who's 116 years old, and there's some monsters at light heavyweight at 175. What did he do? Vacated the belt because he cherry picks, right? He cherry picks, man. Until he fights top-notch competition consistently, like rest in peace Marvin Hagler, then I'll crown him. Until then, I ain't drinking that Kool-Aid, man. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that. While I wrap this up, I'd like to remind you, make sure you fill out your March Madness bracket with under the Drink Beer and Bullshit Challenge. The links are on our Instagram and Facebook for that. The tournament starts on Thursday, but I think you can officially fill it out the latest Saturday morning because Thursday are the play-in games, and then Saturday I think is the official start to the actual challenge. And we will be giving a trophy. So whoever beats us, or not just us, not just your hosts, but everybody that participates, you will get that trophy, the inaugural Drink Beer and Bullshit podcast March Madness trophy. So make sure you get that knocked out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Again, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to tune in Fool's Day, April 1st, when we'll be dropping our first episode. And we will tackle one of the most important questions of our lifetime, the primordial, what is the meaning of life? I'm just joking. I don't know what the fuck the meaning of life is, but we will be tackling something just as important. Are we alone? That's right. Episode 1. Aliens, real or bullshit? Which one do you side with? Tune in with us and have a conversation. Until then, keep it real.